The lights went out, and with them, the world went silent. 1 second everything was normal, then the power cut and the storm outside swallowed up the noise, leaving only the sound of my own breathing in the pitch-black darkness. It froze. I wasn't alone, Stefan. I called, my voice trembling. No answer. I strained my ears, feeling the weight of the stillness around me. A sudden rustle broke that quiet, and before I could turn, I felt Hishin grip my wrist, pulling me toward him. He gasped, panic flashing through me. Wath. How are you doing? His voice was low, Cam, as though nothing was wrong. I'm her. I stumbled back, only to feel him step forward, closing the distance. He was too close. His chest brushed against mine. I could feel his breath on my neck, warm and controlled, sending an electric shiver down my spine. The heat from his body seeped through my thin robe, and I could barely breathe. I wanted to push him away, toss, scream, but something inside me stopped it. Let go of me, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but he didn't listen. I don't think you want me, Toast Fan murmured, his fingers tracing the back of my hand. Slowly my heart hammered in my chest as I tried to pull away. Booth's grip was too strong, his presence too overwhelming. The darkness around us made everything feel even more wrong, too close, too intimate. The air was thick, charged with something neither of us golden. You're shaking, Stefan whispered again, but this time there was something in his tone, something deeper. I shook my head, the words caught in my throat. I'm fine, but the moment we shared was anything but fine. His body pressed harder against mine, and I could feel the heat from his skin seeping through the fabric of my robe. I could hear his breath, slow and deliberate, right against my ear. I wanted to run, to break free, but something held me there, frozen right where he wanted me to stop. I gasped, my voice cracking, please stop. He didn't move. The storm outside raged, but inside it was just us, trapped in the darkness, a silence filled with anticipation, a viral secret. This dark will change everything. Don't miss the twist. Like, share, and subscribe now. I could feel the heat from his body seeping into mine, suffocating me with every inch. He closed. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in, and all I could focus on was him, his touch, his breath, his presence. It wasn't too much. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, pounding louder with each passing second. My mind screamed for me to step back, to break free from the grip that tightened around me, but I couldn't. It was as though his touch had anchored him to the spot, paralyzed with a mixture of fear and something else, something dangerous that I didn't want to acknowledge. Why don't you want me? Toast Fan's voice was low, smooth, like a whisper meant to seduce rather than reassure. His hand slid from my wrist, tracing the curve of my arm, his finger sending shivers along my skin. I gasped, trying to pull away, but he was faster. In a flash, his hand was at my waist, pulling toward him, and his lips brushed my ear. You're not scared of me, are you? He whispered, his voice almost playful, but there was an edge to it, a dangerous edge that sent a ripple of something dark through me. No, I whispered back, my voice shaky. I'm not, but I wasn't sure. Every part of me screamed for distance, for space, but his presence overwhelmed me. It felt like the entire world was just that will of us, caught in a moment. To charge at to ignore the storm outside raged on, beat inside. It was like we were trapped in a vacuum, a moment suspended in time where nothing felt real except them. His hand moved lower, grazing the curve of my hip, and I flinched, my breath catching in my throat, but instead of pulling away, he tightened his hold on me, forcing me closer until below I felt that pressure of his body against mine. I could feel his chest rising and falling, his breath shallow and quickened. I couldn't escape the feeling. Faith was waiting for me to make the next move, to give him permission to push this further, to cross a line that I knew it shouldn't. I started. But the words trailed off. There was no room for reason, no space for the boundaries. I should have set. My mind was clouded, confessed, by the heat of his body, the way his lips hovered near mine, but didn't quit. You shouldn't, Stefan repeated, his voice dangerously close to a growl. But you won't know. I couldn't argue. I didn't want Torg, because part of me did want this, wanted him. The thought terrified me. But it was the truth. His lips finally brushed against mine lightly, at first hesitant, like he was waiting for me to stop him, but I didn't, and that was all the invitation he needed. His kiss was rougher than I expected, hungry, as if he was starving for this moment for me. His hands roamed over my back, pulling me even closer until there was no space left between us. The warmth off his body burned through my clothes, igniting something inside me that I couldn't put out. I tried to pull away, tried to find some part of me that could stop this, but it was too late. The storm outside felt like a distant memory, that thunder now drowned out by the sound of four breathing, our heartbeat, and the dangerous silence that stretched between us. A viral secret. This dark will change everything. Don't miss the twist. Like, share, and subscribe now. His kiss was a force I couldn't fight. His lips were insistent, and the moment our mouths met, everything else ceased to exist. The storm outside, the darkness that surrounded us, it all faded into the background. It was just us, now tangled in the heat of the moment, unable to stop. It should have pushed him away. I should have screamed, done something to break free from the haze that clouded me thoughts, but I didn't. I wanted this. I couldn't deny Itanamore. His hands moved with purpose, sliding down my body, pulling me closer, until there was no space between us. His chest pressed against mine, his breath hot against my lips as he kissed it deeper, harder. Every part of me screamed for control, but I couldn't find it. His hands found the hem of my robe, lifting it up slowly, carefully, like he was savoring the moment. The cool air off the room met my skin, sending a shiver through me, but it wasn't enough to pull him away. I wanted more. I needed more. Stefan, stop. I gasped, pulling back just enough to breathe, but he didn't listen. His lips trailed down my neck, and I felt the warmth of his mouth against me skin, igniting a fire inside me that I couldn't put out. While he murmured, his voice low, dangerous, why stop when you want this too? I couldn't answer. My mind was too clouded, too lost in the chaos of my own desires. He was right. I couldn't deny that between us. It was wrong. So wrong, but at that moment all I could feel was Seamus' hands move lower, tracing the curve of my hips before sliding to mid-thighs. His fingers brushed against that skin just beneath the fabric of my robe. A sharp gasp escaped my lips as shuddered under his touch, the sensation sending a wave of heat through me. Tell him to stop, Stefan whispered against my skin, his breath hot and heavy. And I really wanted to say it. I wanted to tell him to stop, to push him away and regain control of the situation. But the truth was, I didn't want him to stop. I didn't know how to stop this, how to pull away from the storm we were creating together. His hands slid between my legs and a frozen body betrayed me, responding to his touch in ways I couldn't understand. The line between right and wrong blurred, and all I could focus on was the sensation of him, the way his body seemed to know exactly what it needed. Stop. I said, my voice barely a whisper, but my hands didn't move to push him away. Instead, they moved to his chest, my fingers trembling as I felt his rapid heartbeat. He chuckled softly, the sound dark and knowing. You don't really want me to stop, do you? I opened my mouth to protest, but words never came. His lips found mine again, and this time there was no hesitation. I kissed him back, unable to stop myself, giving into the heat that surged between us. The storm outsurged louder, but inside the silence was broken only by our breath, our moans, and the steady beat of our hearts. I was lost, completely lost in him. I wanted to pull back to regain control, but I couldn't. Line between right and wrong was gone, and all that mattered now was this moment. I couldn't breathe. Each touch, each kiss from Stefan was like a fire burning through me, scorching every last bit of resistance. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the air thick with desire, with something darker, something forbidden. His hands moved relentless, like spling, touching until I couldn't remember where he ended, and a bag in every inch of my skin burned with the need for more, for something I couldn't explain. My thoughts were a blur, a chaotic mess of longing and guilt, but he couldn't stop. I didn't want to. Fawn's lips trailed down my neck, his breath hot and eroded. She should have pushed him away. I should have screamed for him to stop, but few words were trapped in my throat. All I could do was cling to him, desperate for more. I can feel your heart racing, Stefan whispered, his lips brushing the sensitive skin of my throat. His voice was a mixture of satisfaction and something else, something dark, almost possessive. You're not fighting me anymore. I wanted to argue, I wanted to deny it, but the truth was too loud to hear. My body was betraying me, responding to him in ways I couldn't control. The more he touched me, the more he wanted him, and the thought terrified me. I tried to speak, but my voice faltered as his hand slid up my back, his fingers trailing across my skin, sending waves of sensation that left me breathless. I don't know what to do. Stefan's grip tightened, and I gasped. Ash lifted me effortlessly, my body pressed against his as he carried me across the room, closer to the bed. His touch was urgent now, as if he couldn't wait any longer. And I could feel his sharp pounding in time with mine. He laid down, his body hovering over mine, his fist inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating from him, and I realized with a sudden clarity that there was no way out of this. We had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. You don't have to say anything, Stefan murmured, his lips brushing against mine as he hovered above me. I can feel it. You want this as much as Ito. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to scream and push him away, but instead I found myself staring into his eyes, lost in the intensity of the moment. My body was betraying me, my hands reaching for him, pulling him closer. His kiss was a claim, a promise of something deeper, darker, more dangerous than I could comprehend. His hands slid down my body, pulling my robe from my shoulders, exposing my skin to the cool air, and I shivered under his touch. The storm outside raged louder. Beauty was nothing compared to the storm inside me. I wanted to stop, to scream for him to pull away, but I couldn't. The temptation was too strong, and every fiber of my being was screaming for more. Stefan's lips met mine again, This time more forcefully, as though he knew I had given in. He knew that I was this. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered against my lips, his voice low and full of promise. This is just the beginning. I wanted to tell him to stop, to tell him this was wrong, but the words never came. Instead, I pulled him closer, my hands tangling in his hair, and for the first time I let go of everything. The power outage, the storm outside, the forbidden nature of it all, it didn't matter anymore in that moment. All that mattered was him. The room was spinning. As I lay beneath him, every inch of my body trembling, caught in the storm of emotions that had consumed us both. He could still feel the electric charge on the air, the heat between us, and it was like nothing else mattered anymore. Stefan's hands moved over me with a sense of purpose, like he knew exactly how to make me forget everything, every hesitation. Every reason to stop hissed out was like fire, and I couldn't escape it. I didn't want to for a moment. Everything else, the storm outside, the guilt, the shame, was lost in the need, the desire that was building inside me. His lips were on my skin, each kiss a reminder of how far we had gone, how much I crossed the line. I reached up, toppled him closer, my hands gripping his, hurt, desperate to feel more of him. The heat of his body was overwhelming, and I couldn't stop myself from drawing him in, kissing him harder, deeper. But then a sudden thought hit me like a cold wave. What if we were caught? What if someone found out? What would this mean for use? This twisted, forbidden bond that had formed between us. I pulled away abruptly, breath ragged, as I looked into Stefan's eyes. What are we doing? It whispered, my voice full of uncertainty. This can't happen. Stefan's gaze softened, but there was a hint of something darker in his eyes. It's already happened, he said, his voice low and calm, as if he had already accepted that this was no longer something we could undo. His hands held steady as he leaned down to kiss me again, his touch gentle, this time almost tender. I didn't know if I should pull away or surrender to the feeling that had overtaken me, but I didn't pull away. We had crossed that line, and now there was no turning back. The storm outside began to quiet, but inside, the chaos had just begun. We were tangled in a web of desire, of guilt, of something we couldn't explain, and for the first time I realized that the dark secret we shared would change everything. There was no going back, no undoing what had been done. As Stefan pulled me into his arms once more, I couldn't help but wonder how much this would cost us in the end, but for now we didn't care for. Now I was his.